Hello, comrades. This is Captain Kris Myers bringing another episode up to the surface. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you kind of get to know its rhythm, its habits. Like, at the bottom of the hour, this episode is going to do a crazy Ivan and turn starboard. So, if you've guessed this week's episode is The Hunt for Red October, you know the show even better than I do. Mr. Patrick? Mr. Mott? One of you fellas set course for this week's episode of the Cinema Shame podcast. Up Periscope.
On this episode of the Cinema Shame podcast, we'll speak with terrible accents, talk about Tom Clancy movie adaptations, some of us without having ever read one of his books, and take a look back at the fertile genre known as the 1990s thriller. And Alan already gave away the fact that he's not actually in the corner trying to fit into an old Village People sailor outfit because he said he's wearing his Martha Coolidge t-shirt. But for this episode, let's just say...
I just want to state for the record that if I was in the Village People, I would be the Leatherman. Thank you.
No,
very
not for
much.
this episode. This episode, you're the sailor.
No, I cannot. I cannot do that.
Come on, just for the bit.
I'll be the damn sailor, you guys. My grandpa was in the Navy.
I'm not going to play along.
Sailor.
I'm not going to play along your rules.
Alan's Canadian, so whatever.
Oh, he doesn't have that that naval pride of the U.S. Navy.
Does Canada have a Navy, Alan?
Oh, I would assume, right?
My nieces and nephews were in the Naval Cadets, even though we're in the middle of the prairie. So that was always a fun little thing. They were Naval Cadets in a province that has no water.
Mm-hmm. Don't you just have icebreakers or something? It doesn't really feel like a... Okay. My guest today is Jen Johans. She's a prolific and acclaimed writer, film critic, and historian. She's the host of the podcast Watch with Jen. She regularly moonlights on other podcasts, usually stealing the show, which makes me wonder why I asked her on here to upstage us both with her boundless charm and positivity. Her recent commentary on Moonstruck for the Rogue Commentary podcast is something I definitely recommend you add to your listening queue. Jen has made 2 appearances on Cinema Shame already during the Shamely Awards, but we've never given her the proper full-length episode treatment until now. So welcome, Jen.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. I always enjoy doing those Cinema Shame Awards, sharing my favorite discoveries for the year.
You can go back and find those. We've done a couple, 3, 2? I don't know. I can't even keep track of the ones we've done.
Yeah.
I think you've been on 2. I think I've done 3. And the first one I did mostly because I felt like it. There was no planning involved. I hope you've been practicing your Scotch-Russian accent for this episode, because I'm going to have to ask you to talk like Sean Connery in Hunt for October for the rest of the episode.
Uh-oh. I don't think anyone wants that. I can't act my way out of a paper bag.
We all do, actually. No,
yeah.
I think it's pretty unanimous. Yeah.
No, I am lucky to be friends with some really great actors, so I'm not going to, just hurt their ears. Yes.
Okay, now the first question we have to ask everyone who comes on Cinema Shame podcast, why the hell didn't you watch Hunt for October in 1990 like everyone else? I should note that Alan hasn't watched it either, so why the hell both of you did you not watch Hunt for October with everyone else in 1990?
I have a story. I actually did.
This is why you're here.
Yeah, this is why I'm here. I saw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the theater with my brother Jim, my older brother. It was the first movie we saw at night alone in the theater. Our parents were in the next theater watching Hunt for Red October. But this was the first time we were alone, and it was at night. It was scary. Everyone knows, the first Turtles movie. I mean, really, it's to me the only one because you have Elias Koteas looking, sexy as hell. And still everyone had a crush on him in that 1990. And so, it's a little spooky though when you're 9 years old, and by the end credits, it's dark, the lights are on, and I was just like, oh my God, we're out at night and scared. And so we had to walk into the theater next to us and find my parents. And their movie, Hunt for Red October, was longer, of course. And so we just sat there by my parents, and I was like, oh, okay, we're going to be okay. Like, parents are here. And I nodded off in the theater. And then every time, not that I tried to watch it like a million times as a kid, but like every time my brother, my dad, they were watching this movie, I would just fall asleep when I was a kid. I don't know why. And I think I might have tried it once as an adult. And I'm not somebody who normally falls asleep in movies. Fell asleep again. I talked to my friend Jordan Harper, who's a novelist and a screenwriter, and he kind of psychoanalyzed me. He's like, you know what it is? It's you put it on and you go back to like 1990, being scared, finding your parents. And so you just feel safe and you just completely fall asleep. So damn it, when you asked me like, what movie do you need to watch? Because I love Tom Clancy thrillers. I love the political thrillers, the 90s, the 80s, you know, all these filmmakers. And so I was stoked, and I just thought, I'm going to make it through, because at this point it's embarrassing. And I've seen most of the classics and just like Hunt for Red. So I'm here, and I'm glad you gave me this challenge, because I made it through.
Did you do a quad shot or something beforehand? What was the preparation like?
No, I watched it during the day.
No, she did it terrified.
I watched it during the day in the Phoenix heat, you know, like you're not falling asleep. And so I've watched it twice this week in preparation. And, you know, my friend Priscilla Page is a brilliant writer, and she wrote this great essay about it a few years ago. So, you know, I've done my research, can't do the accent, but I'm excited to be here. But Alan, tell me why you haven't seen it, because you're making me feel better about this. Yeah.
Well, because I was 14 when it came out, and I was a teenage communist. Okay. Basically, like I was very much one of those kids during. I was one of the kids during the Cold War whose attitude was like, "Why are the Russians always the bad guys?" And so I tended to avoided movies where it was explicitly like felt like an America versus Russia thing, which actually turned out to be a mistake.
Do you feel silly now?
Because yeah, no, I do feel silly now. But my problem was the reason why I never went back to it was because I ended up seeing Patriot Games and A Clear and Present Danger, and I just wasn't a fan of them. Like, I just didn't like. I'm not a Jack Ryan fan as a character. Although this is easily my favorite iteration of the character, because I find it much more interesting to have him be like this bookworm who is basically forced to be like sort of on the thing, whereas opposed to like by the time Harrison Ford is playing him, he's a full-on action hero. And I find that a lot less interesting than sort of this Alec Baldwin version of the character, who is basically a handsome nerd married to Gates McFadden who just happens to be forced into the situation because he's the only one who can figure out, you know, the exact situation going on. So yeah, I regret not having seen it. But at the same time, like, it was just a case where this was not, when it came out, this was not in my my sort of purview.
The most brilliant commander in the Soviet Navy.
Ramey has trained most of their officer corps. He's nearly a legend in the submarine community.
The most deadly submarine ever built.
This thing could park a couple of hundred warheads off Washington. Nobody'd know a thing about it until it was all over.
And once more, we play our dangerous game with our old adversaries, the American Navy.
His plan is a mystery.
A man with your responsibilities reading about the end of the world.
Apparently, he has suffered a kind of nervous breakdown in which he announced his intention to fire his missiles on the United States.
You want us to help you hunt him down, kill him?
Open the outer doors, firing point procedures. We sail into history.
I'm gonna blow him right to Mars. Ramius might be trying to defect.
You're just an analyst. What can you possibly know what goes on in his mind?
I'll give you 3 days to prove your theory correct. I am not field personnel. I am only an analyst.
You're perfect.
I'm expendable. He's defecting.
You willing to bet your life on that?
From the best-selling novel by Tom Clancy. From the director of Die Hard.
Give this man a chance.
My orders are specific. Battle stations.
Sean Connery, Alec Baldwin, James Earl Jones, Scott Glenn, Sam Neill. The Hunt for Red October.
So, The Hunt for Red October came out in 1990, directed by John McTiernan, and it stars pretty much every middle-aged actor in Hollywood at the time. Actually, Hollywood and beyond. I mean, it's Alec Baldwin. He's not quite there yet, but so Alec Baldwin's a star, obviously. Sean Connery, Scott Glenn, James Earl Jones, Sam Neill, Tim Curry, Fred Thompson, Stellan Skarsgård, Courtney B. Vance. The list of qualified actors in this goes on and on and on. Even the supporting roles are filled with notable actors.
Yeah.
It is the adaptation of the 1984 novel of the same name and the first cinematic appearance of Jack Ryan. It was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, sound mixing, film editing, and it won Best Sound Editing. It made a total of $122 million in 1990, good for 6th on the year, and, I did not know this, laid claim to the largest non-summer and non-Thanksgiving opening for $17 million opening weekend. And it's directed by that notable crotchety guy named John McTiernan, as I said. I had the pleasure of interviewing John McTiernan right before he was incarcerated, and he was just ripe with disgust for everything and everybody. He was at the Basic junket, and he would probably rather have murdered us all than speak another word about that film. It was one of my least favorite conversations I've ever had with another human.
So that sort of explains how Rollerball happened.
Yes.
Because talking about a career drop-off, like a man who's made some of the greatest films of all time, and then he sort of caps his career with one of the worst blockbusters ever.
And I don't entirely blame John McTiernan because he got kind of a raw deal. But yes, it certainly was a precipitous drop from the heights from the late 80s and early 90s.
You continually saying incarcerated and crotchety is making me think of that great moment in Say Anything. I'm incarcerated, Lloyd! Yes. And John McTiernan's here. No, I'm just kidding. But
just pull him on set. That'd be amazing. It's like, I'm sorry. It was the best conversation I ever had, John. I don't know what I was thinking. I might still have the tape. I wonder if I still have the tape. That's a good question. Because they were on those...
That'd be good to throw in here.
Those little tiny...
micro cassettes. I still have mine, yeah.
Yeah, I found a bunch of them recently, and I think my daughter found them and thought they're the cutest thing ever, and was like, where can I play these? I want to listen. I'm like, I don't know. No idea. Good luck with all that. Yeah. So the fascination lasted about 15 minutes when she realized she couldn't pop it into anything, really. Interesting notes about production. This was a result of Mace Neufeld. His first feature film was The Omen in 1976. Pretty good start to his production career. He optioned the Tom Clancy novel after reading some galley proofs, and it took him almost 2 years to get his studio to commit to the film because they said it was too complicated, was the general response. I know that in the screenwriting process, Larry Ferguson, who wrote Highlander, so I don't know how complicated it could have been, and Donald E. Stewart, who was an Oscar winner for Missing, took out some of the novel's more complicated plots, and since I haven't read the novel, I'll take all of their word for it that it was a far more complicated story. Although I also read that it's pretty similar to the book. Have you read any of the books, Jen, or are we just spouting incoherent nonsense?
I think I remember reading Patriot Games in the 90s, but that was about the only one.
Yeah. The Navy was at first reluctant because they worried the film would spill some of their dirty little secrets, but relented because they thought that this would do for submariners what Top Gun did for fighter pilots. I'm not so sure.
I don't think you can successfully sell the concept of being on a submarine. I think that's just something that you either really want to do or you are forced by the fact that you're in the Navy and they force you on a submarine to do. I don't think...
There's no volleyball scene, and we need that.
Yeah.
It's true. Tony Scott didn't direct this either. Maybe there's a chance if Tony Scott gets a hold of this material, but I don't see John McTiernan really selling this to... 10-year-old kids who are looking for a career in claustrophobia.
No, we're falling asleep in the theater. Yeah.
And if anything, I felt like the submarines in this, and I think they were built to actual size, but they seemed like more spacious than I'm used to seeing in a submarine film. Like of the submarine films I've seen, this is the one that seems the less claustrophobic.
They didn't really go to an extreme to exaggerate that sense of claustrophobia as in some other submarine films. They were more concerned with the political machinations, I think. Although Sean Connery had not too many nice things to say about filming. He was brought in last minute. Who dropped out? I'm blanking on the. Well, that'll come to me.
Okay. You know what I was thinking, listening to you guys talk about how this was the first Jack Ryan, and of course then Harrison Ford, he got his submarine movie later, K-19. Yeah.
I actually was thinking of that.
Klaus Maria Brandauer. He was the original Ramius, but quit 2 weeks into filming. Sean Connery was then offered the role, and he showed up on a Friday, and they began filming on Sunday. And that's only because he wanted an extra day to rehearse.
It's always helpful. Yeah, and they gave him a $20,000 hairpiece.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's very
so
nice.
To look like Samuel Beckett. So they did style him in such a way, and he looks amazing. Yeah.
I will be able to say that I've gotten into watching movie reactions on YouTube, and I subscribe to a couple of Patreons. And one of my favorite reactors is a Russian woman who lives in Canada. And so watching it for my first time, I thought, well, I think she did this one. So I put it on, so I will be able to provide the Russian perspective on this. And she could not understand a single word that Sam Neill and Sean Connery were saying in Russian. It was complete gibberish.
There was no dialect coach on this movie. I do not think there was much coaching.
Apparently some of the extras were Russian because she could tell what they were saying in the background. But for the most part, every actor who is has a major role who speaks Russian is not speaking it well.
So when Connery came on, the production team brought in John Milius, who brought some extra rewrites to Connery's character. Especially, I read the Russian bits. So all of that is John Milius as well.
That tracks.
Yeah, what I love about Milius is when he was interviewed about it, and they were saying, this is the first time that Connery kind of played a three-dimensional guy. He's usually a stereotype in movies, and they were citing, I think, the other writers or something, and Milius just, in that Milius way, is like, well, they're just not as good at writers as I am. Yeah, which, gotta love Milius, yes. It's Mr. Red Dawn. What are you going to do? Yeah.
I mean, he was saying that about an Oscar winner, but he couldn't really duplicate, so screw him anyway.
Oh, man.
Parad great prikaz, Tashkidov. Sampalet Putin v Coyote.
Goodbye.
Хорошо, прими штурвал.
We'll do a quick plot synopsis. I mean, there's probably someone out there who's, never seen it. So this is set.
I mean, there are two of us.
But you've seen it now, so you're off the list. You're good. This is set during the late Cold War. The plot revolves around a rogue Soviet naval captain played by Sean Connery who wants to defect to the U.S. with his officers and one of the Soviets' most advanced ballistic submarines. CIA analyst Jack Ryan analyzes and correctly interprets the captain's motives. And Richard Jordan, best known as Uncle Howard in Secret of My Success, obviously gives Ryan 3 days to confirm his suspicions or he sinks the ship. That's all you need to know, really. And Connery speaks with his Scottish accent throughout the entire movie.
Well, I think that's probably the most clever move the film makes is they begin it with everyone on the Russian sub talking in Russian, and then you have this camera move where the actor transitions from speaking in Russian to speaking in English, and suddenly that's sort of like McTiernan's way of telling us they're still speaking in Russian, but now we can understand them and we don't need the
Yeah, I
subtitles.
really like that, and it hinges on the one word that they share in both languages. So Peter Firth says the word Armageddon, which is the same in English and Russian, and then that's when it flips, and there's a nice bit of camera motion. I wanted to ask, since this was your first time seeing it, and since I'd seen it in the theater, and I've watched it a bunch of times since, so it was today that I started paying attention to the details. And I think when you see a movie at so what was I, 12?
Okay.
You're not thinking about these sorts of things. So coming back and really looking at it and the way they put it together, I thought that was a really interesting trick to start with Russian, no matter how bad it was. It sounds fine to us, obviously.
Yeah.
And then carry on with the rest of the movie in English.
Yeah, Priscilla was thinking that it came from Judgment at Nuremberg because McTiernan is a huge fan of that film, and they do something similar there. Yeah.
It's another movie I haven't seen in a very long time, but yeah, that makes sense. And then, it switches back to the end when the Americans and the Russians are in the same room together, which I thought was a nice way of bringing it back around, and then having the contrast between the different sailors.
It's a shame then that I don't know if there's like a Russian cut where they have the English actors talking in English the whole thing, and then there's a camera move and all of a sudden they're talking in Russian for the rest of the movie.
I didn't look that
I
up.
had
You're
an
on
experience like that with Clear and Present Danger, actually, when I came down to Arizona for the first time from Minnesota. And I went to the library and I was trying to find something actually for my grandpa, Mr. Navy, to entertain him. I found Clear and Present Danger, and I didn't look at the video closely before I rented it. And it was the Spanish. So anytime they speak Spanish in the movie, there were no subtitles whatsoever, and I had only gotten through a couple quarters of college Spanish at the time, and so they would talk for a few minutes, and then my grandpa would look expectantly at me like, what did they say? Yeah, he agrees. You're like I don't know. Yeah. So I would love to know that for this movie in Russia. Yeah.
I'm guessing it didn't make it over there, honestly, but
yeah,
maybe not until much later.
Yeah, the whole defection thing, I think.
They would probably frown upon that coming into the, yeah.
And naming the character Putin, that was, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the reactor was sort of like, why did they name him that on purpose? But it was like, it's 1990, so I'm guessing it was just like a weird sort of coincidence.
Yeah, although maybe Clancy, was up on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure. I didn't read, I didn't think about it, but I'm not sure how much involvement Clancy had with the production. I didn't look into that.
Yeah. No, I didn't know if it was in the book. Yeah.
Because I am curious.
Yeah.
I'm not sure he's super hands-on with the film productions, though. I think
the video games. Yes.
I knew he was lording over those very carefully. But I get the impression that that's one of those situations where the books were so popular that they had to defer to the book whenever possible for the adaptation, sort of like the Harry Potter effect. You don't want to piss off the core fan base by really adapting anything. Although some of them are really long, and I don't know how you cram that into a feature film.
Yeah.
Well, we're still on the topic of the dialogue. What did we think about the actors once we switch back to English using their own accents? And I say this loosely for the most part, because they all didn't.
Yeah. I was mostly grateful for that. Like, I think it would have been really difficult if Connery had attempted a Russian accent, because that was just simply not his strong suit. He's much more present on screen just being Sean Connery.
Yeah, I'm fine with it if they want to use it's not going to pull me out of, when a story or a script or a film, especially the way this is put together, Jan de Pont's cinematography and just how, impeccably crafted it is, I'm not going to get hung up. It's not going to pull me out of it to hear different accents. Yeah.
Well, and also I think like the thing I was thinking about, and it's like we're so used to the idea of hearing different accents in English, but I think because we don't commonly hear other languages, we forget that there are different accents in different languages. So I think there's also kind of like a cheeky sort of thing the film does where it says that Connery is not actually Russian, he's Lithuanian. So as far as we know, Lithuanians have the Scottish version of the Russian accent, like the.
I think it allows us to get more into the characters, but I mean this isn't. I mean this is a pop culture movie. It's a popular film. It wasn't meant to be high art. We weren't supposed to be caring about Sean Connery's accent, and notoriously his accents are terrible in film. Like there really isn't. I can't think of a Connery movie where I thought, that accent was spot on. I mean, he's always, even when he's attempting an accent, it still sounds Scottish. So I was grateful that we just let him act as he does. And with all the actors too, you're allowing them the ability to speak in a way that's comfortable to them. And if they were able to do the accent, they went with the accent. And some of them I noticed had a fluctuating ability to continue, but none of it was all that distracting. And I think that, like I said, that benefits the characters we got on the screen.
We got Tim Curry's most toned down Russian accent compared to some of his other Russian accents.
You see Tim Curry in the credits, and if you're going to pick one guy that's going to go for it.
Why does Frank have that extraordinary accent? Why? Well, we tried all kinds of things. When I first read it, I read it German. I was very like this, and very sort of Middle European and sort of. And that was a little used, I think. So then we tried it American. And it was Jim Sharman, the director's idea, to make him the sort of Belgravia hostess with the mostest. So and I remembered being on a bus once when a very sort of Debbie lady in a headscarf turned to a friend who was sitting in front of me and she said, "Do you have a house in the town or a house in the country?" And the phrase had always stuck in my mind, and so that's the voice that I used. I see. It became a sort of trademark of him, really.
That was actually the thing that surprised me, which is because we're so used to like sort of over the top Tim Curry performances, and it seemed like almost the film was like depending on that, because then his character ends up being sort of the most grounded of all the characters on the actual Russian sub.
And the one thing that I found, again, you start picking apart different things, and I never thought about how the special effects were done for this film, and the opening shot, because I know it was filmed on a series of 5 sound stages in Paramount for the most part. Like all the interiors were done so that they were lifted up, and they created a system to simulate the rocking of the boat, which is what pissed Connery off because he got motion sick the whole time. So they had these things listing the tanks while they were in the submarine and causing all the shifting. But the opening shot, which is a full-size submarine shot, and I mean, we're not dealing with any CGI for this, but it was actually 2 tankers that were welded together with a false top on to show that model of the submarine, and it's almost entirely 1-for-1 size-wise to the real submarine. And you could look back at the movies just before the CGI started becoming the norm, and we were looking at that just a couple of years with Terminator 2 and the buzz that Cameron created with his CGI, but the film looks remarkably good. I mean, I say that in also knowing that the Blu-ray is is a rough transfer, but the actual filmmaking itself looks tremendous. What we're given, and the submarine sets, and nothing is faked. Everything is a recreation of images that were taken from real U.S. submarines. And the attention to detail, I think, was what really brings us into that world. And I welcome the return to practical effects and modeling, and watching this was a welcome dose of that just before we hit CGI world.
Yeah, I mean, even the gauges worked right down to the gauges, the smallest details. Reading Priscilla's notes, it was on a gimbal made to move 45 degrees backward, forward, sideways. Yep, and I think it was Don Winslow that said basically the same kind of methodology was also used a few years later for Crimson Tide. Yeah, which I love. Talking about, the Scots, making a submarine movie, yeah. Yes.
One of them had to eventually. And I guess you could argue that Alien is a submarine.
A little bit, yeah.
The story is actually based on a real incident that came out later. It was 1975.
I was going to say, because I thought it was being cheeky, but I always loved that sort of like opening crawl that's sort of like, this is based on a true story, but no one's going to admit it.
They actually did that because it came out it was right before the movie was set to release, was when the Soviet Union started to collapse. So they're like, well, how is this going to play? So they added that as like, oh, this happened before, so there's no confusion over which Soviet Union we're talking about. But it was based on a 1975 mutiny aboard a Soviet destroyer called the Storozhevoy, something like that. And that was a plot to overthrow Brezhnev and the current Soviet government. An officer by the name of Valery Sablin? Sure. Seized control of the ship and convinced half the officers to sail to Leningrad, where they were going to start the new Russian Revolution.
And it did not work.
Doesn't seem like it, no. My Soviet history is a little spotty, but that doesn't seem like something I learned about.
Now, my other Russian revelation is apparently October. When it's in Russian, the Russian alphabet at the beginning, October is misspelled.
Oh. Someone's fired. Yep.
You son of a bitch!
You wish to add something to our discussion, Dr. Ryan?
All right, let's talk about Alec Baldwin. As the first Jack Ryan, we went from Alec Baldwin to Harrison Ford to Ben Affleck to Jim from The Office.
Chris Pine.
You're skipping Chris Pine.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Fine. That movie.
Well, the movie, but you can't overlook Pine. Yeah.
No, you can't overlook Pine. We mentioned earlier that Alan mentioned earlier that he really liked Alec Baldwin in the role, and I have to agree, because this is exactly what Jack Ryan was supposed to be, was this semi-nerdy, awkward analyst, and not an action hero that we get with Harrison Ford later on.
Yeah, I love it because it's not really what I would think of from this era of Alec Baldwin. Like Glengarry Glen Ross, Malice, I Am God. I love, the cocky asshole version of Alec Baldwin. And so to see him playing kind of nerdy.
Well, he sort of, because to me it's sort of a continuation of his Beetlejuice role.
Yeah.
And then sort of, I think after this, he was sort of like, yeah, I want to push the cocky more, and that's why he ends up doing like sort of the more villainous roles, and that and the shadow flop. So his sort of that sort of
the
curtailed his
man
leading man sort of yeah.
We got pushed into more of the mainstream thriller and action hero roles that didn't give him much opportunity to be anything but cocksure and play the stereotypical action hero.
Well, you also get the sense, though, that when he's playing an asshole, he's playing himself more. Like the Jack Ryan and Beetlejuice guys are more him in acting mode than the other way around.
About 1992-93 is when the big Alec Baldwin kicks in, and I think this is probably the last vestige of the low key Baldwin that we're gonna get, and that's another thing I really like about this movie, especially in comparison to the later iterations of Jack Ryan.
Yeah. Well, this has to be easily his biggest hit as a lead. Like he's been in some other movies that did well, but I think this has to be the one that is like an Alec Baldwin movie that is absolutely like his top one.
Yeah, I got nothing. I got no knee-jerk reaction to that. I think we'll call you right.
Yeah. Which is funny because I think most people in their heads think of it as a Sean Connery movie before they think of it as an Alec Baldwin movie. Because that's like when you said it stars Alec Baldwin, in my head I was like, does it though? Like I feel like Sean Connery is probably the actual lead of the movie. And I know that like my two favorite characters were Courtney Vance and Richard Jordan.
You slammed the door on the general pretty hard, Jack.
That was not my intention, sir.
Oh, yes, it was. He was patronizing you, and you stomped on him. My opinion, he deserved it. Listen, I'm a politician, which means I'm a cheat and a liar. And when I'm not kissing babies, I'm stealing their lollipops. But it also means that I keep my options open. So, let's assume for a minute that you're right, and this Russian intends to defect. What do you suggest we do about it?
We definitely grabbed the boat, sir.
Hey, wait a minute. We're not talking about some stray pilot with a MiG. We're talking about several $1 billion worth of Soviet state property. They're gonna want it back.
Maybe it's enough then just to get some people on board and inspect it. Call it whatever you want to, a Coast Guard safety inspection.
So how do we proceed?
Well, first we would need to contact the commanders in the Atlantic directly. The Russians get one whiff of this through the regular communication circuits, the game is up. Second, we need to figure out what can we do to help them. We need to devise a plan to intercede, ready to go at a moment's notice. And third, somebody's got to go out there and make contact with Ramius and find out what his intentions really are.
Okay, when do you leave?
Wait a minute. The general was right. I am not field personnel. I am only an analyst.
You're perfect. I can't ask any of these characters to go. One, they don't believe in it. Two, they'd never stake their reputation on a hunch. Whereas you
are expendable.
Like, I always forget about Richard Jordan because he passed away so young that he sort of like disappeared but every time I see him in something, I was like, oh yeah, I remember him. He's really good. Like, he's actually really good in The Secret of My Success.
He is. Yeah, that's probably where I was like, I knew him best because I watched Secret of My Success about 40 times too many. Yeah. And so he's always the secret of my success, Uncle Howard. Like, that's just...
The first thing I ever saw him in was an adaptation of Les Miserables. But it also had Louis Jordan in it, so I always get the two of them mixed up in my head.
Yeah. Like, he was a really big stage actor before he kind of migrated over to film.
My thing was not enough Stellan Skarsgård. I love him in this period. You know, he's good at playing smarmy, or just, I was getting into the second viewing, just how much this man, especially in that opening when we first see him, just, he's one of those actors who loves their props. He's a great smoking actor. I'm a huge fan of De Niro. That was like my first big crush when I was a girl. And so these actors that really kind of dig into their props. And so this is kind of one of those Hall of Fame great moments in cigarette acting. And I am asthmatic. I'm not a smoker, but just watching this dude cock his head, say his intense stuff with a cigarette. I mean, how does that thing not fall out?
These orders are 7 bloody hours old. Sitting on the bottom like an adult schoolboy.
Captain.
Passing at one. All ahead flank. All ahead flank.
Inquire of the engineer about the possibility of going to 105% on the reactor.
7 hours. The entire fleet is after him.
It's a whole thing. He plays with matches. I wanted more scenes of that. Yeah, give him some more monologues. Let's see him go.
every time one of them broke out of smoke, like that's almost sort of broke the movie a bit for me. It's like, even if that happened in real life, I'm like, who the fuck would smoke on a submarine? Like, if there's one place you don't smoke
everywhere.
Yeah, but the Americans smoked on the submarine too.
Servicemen, yeah, I think, you're stuck down there. You need something to do. Yeah. They're not in Cuba yet, you guys. Yeah.
It's like one of those things that when they're not comfortable with what they're doing and the prop that they're given, it really stands out. And the guys or the women, like just smoking in film, like I hate this.
Yeah.
Like if someone is really good with a cigarette in a movie, it's one of those instantaneous things that stands out. One of my favorite scenes of all time is Dan Aykroyd's cigarette in Ghostbusters. And I don't know how much of that was accidental, but it's just a perfect accident or perfect moment and sticking to his lip. But it's like the cigarette itself can make an entire movie somehow, some way.
I mean, look at Wong Kar-wai movies, Tony Leung. I mean, just hello.
Yeah. Oh my God.
In the Mood for Love is a cigarette movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's all smoke.
Yes, it is. And I mean, but it goes right back to noir. You kind of wish you could put Aykroyd, put Skarsgård in these movies, yes.
Well, just to see what would happen. You want to see these guys interact somehow and get all the smoking in one movie.
Yes. And then just like stay the hell away from that set for the rest of us.
We want it to be a dogma movie so that it has there's no special lenses or anything. All the smoke is contained. We're not allowed to ventilate.
I want to see that listicle of like the top 100 smokiest movies of all time. Winona Ryder starred in 50 of them.
Yes. Betty Davis. Yes.
Yeah.
Cigar, cigarette, Sensen.
Okay, so it sounds like, and correct me if I'm getting ahead of myself, but it's that you both really liked this film.
Oh, yeah.
I did. Yeah.
Very compelling. Yep. I like that it's, the action actually doesn't really kick in until late into the film. Then we have our traditional action movie showdown. But until then, you just basically see these guys kind of figure each other out. And it's kind of just a sorrowful, you feel bad when you get the motive. I don't know how much you want to talk about spoilers, but when
we love spoilers.
We love spoilers.
Okay.
We believe that spoilers can only enhance a viewing experience because it might get you to actually watch the movie.
Okay. Well, when you find out that it is the anniversary of the death of the Sean Connery character's wife, who he loved, and how he makes a comment like, I widowed her when I married her, essentially. And so you realize that the impulse for this guy is, grief and just moving on and getting away from this life. Like he is done with war and he's putting this behind him and wants to kind of return to the, in the twilight of his life, go back to the beginning, kind of like we see our parents do and our grandparents. And so there's that beautiful moment at the end, when about fishing and a quote from Columbus. And then also when we dream of home. And then finally you get Jack Ryan able to sleep on a plane. And there's just something really beautiful about this. It's more emotional than I think you would expect going in. You think like just a bunch of dudes on a submarine. I mean, unless you're talking about Das Boot, like that's a different story. But this, there's some real heavy stuff going on that's motivating these people. They are three-dimensional. Yeah.
I think it's that emotional quality that really allowed, because I'm traditionally not a fan of this genre sort of thing. But the fact that it was about characters and a story, and there are no like clear cut villains. It's basically everybody is sympathetic. Everybody sort of has their own motivations. I mean, and I don't even really consider it to be an action movie. I think sort of the few set pieces there are in there just to me, like they're nice little bits of tension.
Yeah.
Well, it was also more about expertise. I think that's the thing I really like about this movie. It's a movie about people who are very good at their jobs, who know exactly what they're doing, and they're at cross purposes, and they have to basically figure out a way to get to a situation where, not a lot of people die. Just Skellen Skarsgård's crew. They're the only ones who really suffer.
Yeah, it is great competency porn, essentially, which is what Melville did and what Michael Mann does so brilliantly. Yeah, which is kind of my favorite. That's my shit. I mean, Pakula did that. Soderbergh loves it. Fincher. It's like, watching people who are really good at their jobs. I mean, sign me up. Yeah.
And I think that's why Courtney Vance's character was my favorite.
Yes, exactly.
He was clearly the best at what he did.
Oh, he's incredible.
Yeah. And that one sequence, and it's when he's watching it with the movie reactor, she was like, I love this, but I have no idea what he's saying. And I think that's one thing about the movie, is that it doesn't dumb anything down. Like, it basically expects you to just keep up, and if you don't understand the technical jargon, you'll still be able, but via context clues, to figure out what's going on. They're not having some crew member going like, blah, 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 to explain it to us dummies in the crowd who don't know what the technical
jargon is. It's really a character piece. It's you said it's not a outright action thriller. At best, you could probably consider it a low-key thriller of some variety. You want to get into micro-genreing it. But we're dealing with universal character emotion, not Russian, not American. I mean, these are all people who want realistic things for themselves, and they have to go about, whether it's doing their job correctly, going with your instincts, the way the Russians have to figure out how to communicate with the Americans. I mean, there's a language barrier situation. I mean, I think we're all been in a situation where you felt like that. I think the Submarine movie is a great way to let those universal themes play out, the way that your humans are forced to interact in very close quarters. And that, we've seen it over the years in many Submarine iterations, where it's a war movie, but it's more about the people inside the boat rather than the larger affair.
I also love Scott Glenn. Anytime I see his name in a credit, I just immediately, I love Scott Glenn. And what I just was so fascinated by his character, because he should be the most staunchly militaristic guy. And he just kind of like midway through, it just starts to come around to a different type of thinking. And it shows that, these people can think with logic. And I think a lot of times in some of these films, we want to just sort of paint everybody with one brush, especially in military type films. And so it was really cool to see that him listen to the nerd and become impressed, and then, just interact with people, and how these are just men at the end of the day. And not cartoonishly Cold War characters. Yeah.
It's the rare film like this where everyone behaves reasonably.
Yeah.
There's never a moment where you're going, that guy is only doing this because the plot demands that he acts this way.
Yes.
Everyone basically is following a path that makes sense and is logical for their character.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And what I'm most impressive is you think about how this came merely 3 years after Rocky IV. Right.
Yeah.
And you're looking at the version of Russia that we get in Rocky IV, and this in relatively close proximity. Mm-hmm. So I think it's pretty remarkable that maybe it's allowed, or that the public was so receptive to something that was pretty devoid of jingoism, considering how strongly we felt about Rocky IV's version just years before.
Well, and I think that's why, Sean Connery is such a major part of the film's success, because I don't think that would necessarily be true if it had been Klaus Maria Brandauer. But because it is an actor who we venerate and love in that role, we are automatically sympathetic to him. He would basically have to do some truly heinous shit for us to dislike him as a character. So the fact that, sort of with Klaus Maria Brandauer, I think literally from the first moment, people will be like, yeah, I don't trust this guy.
No, it's true. And it is a strange bit of casting happenstance if they really were going in that direction, as reports say that there was, weeks filmed with him in the role, and then having to flip that switch to change to Connery. These are not the same actor with the same reputation, marketability. It's curious to me that's where it started, because it's one of Connery's. It's one of the roles that I think people most know him for outside of.
I was just about to troll you and go, it's easily his most iconic role.
Yeah, well, there's one role, and then there's, what people think of as Last Crusade and Hunt for Red October, and then I'd struggle to come up with... Yes. Yeah. So it's all about this...
Darby O'Gill and the Little People, Come on, we all know.
Again, that goes without saying.
Ever seen the seagulls, the flying or the heather, or the crimson sails on Galway Bay? The fishermen unfurl. Oh, the earth is filled with beauty.
Don't we all love Finding Forrester? No. I actually like the movie, but yeah.
I remember, I haven't seen it since I saw it in the theater, but I remember thinking it was perfectly pleasant.
Yes, yeah. I hosted a discussion and a lecture on that, and I remember it was when we kicked it off, there was this Irish guy in the front rows, I still haven't forgiven him for what he did as, in Untouchables with that horrible accent. This was good. What he did to the Irish people. But this was good.
The one he won the Oscar for.
Yeah.
Is it time? I think it might be time. I think we've done a good job with the movie itself, and it might be quiz time, unless there are any objections.
Not on my part.
No? Well, Alan says it's good to go, so it's quiz time.
Stand by. Going to air.
Stand by, Phil.
5,
Stand by music.
4,
Stand by now.
3, 2, 1.
And fade up.
We're going to give you a softball to start, all right? Number 1. What is the best submarine movie not named Das Boot or The Hunt for Red October?
Crimson Tide.
Operation Petticoat.
The answer is below, actually. I was going with a really sneaky one there. It's below.
Okay.
Ghosts on the Submarine. Or is it Ghosts? You don't know.
Cary Grant, Tony Curtis, a lot of
Ghosts
really
on the Submarine.
Starlets.
Fine.
Yeah.
Fine. I'll recant.
No,
I'll
I'm going
recant.
Operation Petticoat.
Denzel and Gene Hackman. Yeah.
All right. Number 2. Submarine movies are usually pretty damn serious affairs. Over the years, Hollywood managed to make a few laughs out of the genre. I'll name the actor, and you're going to tell me the submarine-based comedy in which they starred. 2. Kelsey Grammer.
Periscope.
The answer is Down Periscope.
Down Periscope, yeah.
1996's Down Periscope. And the last one, because there aren't many submarine comedies, Bill Pullman.
Are we counting U-571, or is it...
Did you find that funny?
I mean, not in the conventional sense. I don't...
That must be an obscure Bill Pullman movie, because it's not coming to me.
It's called Going Under, released in 1991.
Up, periscope. Batten down the hatchet. And anchors away. The U.S. sub Standard
Under.
is now going under.
Dutch boy. Dutch boy. Dutch boy.
Captain Biff Banner leads his gallant crew. His mighty vessel.
You and I both know you always wanted to sit on the helm of a big submersible projectile.
And the girl of his dreams on an impossible mission to save the world.
Deploy the Pink November.
The hunt is on.
And get home in time for golf.
Is it too late to apply for a transfer?
In the seat. Or on the left. Oh. Get ready for the ride of your life.
Captain! Snap! Out of it!
Now hear this. Now hear this. We are going under.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that one.
I just heard that he called himself the Denny's of actors. You gotta love Bill Pullman. So funny.
I love Bill Pullman.
Yeah.
And I
do
didn't know this
too.
movie exists until today. And now I feel like I owe it to Bill to see Going Under from 1991.
I kind of do too. And I'm sorry, I don't even know if he's in U571, so I'm sorry for the shade.
That's Matthew McConaughey.
Yes. Because they're just identical. Yeah.
All right. Number 3. We have a tradition on this podcast of attempting to bring up Sidney Lumet whenever possible. It's happened once already this episode, but I'm going to do it again. How does Sidney Lumet relate to anything Submarine?
So we're doing 6 degrees of Sidney Lumet with submarines.
It's a pretty direct connection. I guess it's 2 degrees of separation.
Sidney Lumet directed Family Business, which starred Sean Connery, who is in The Hunt for Red October.
There you go.
I'll allow it, but...
It wasn't what you were thinking of.
But it wasn't what I was thinking, so that therefore wrong. In 1962, Sidney Lumet directed a movie called A View from the Bridge, which was about illegal Italian immigrants. In the 1920s, sailors would arrive in New York to go on shore leave. They became a phenomenon where a certain number of Italian immigrants failed to leave after their shore leave. The seamen stowaways were called submarines and caused great concern among immigration authorities. This inspired Arthur Miller to write the screenplay for A View from the Bridge, directed by Sidney Lumet.
Wow. Very cool.
I'm not sure it's even mentioned in the film, but that's the connection.
Very cool.
All right. Now, I sent you both a link to the box office numbers for 1990 earlier.
Mm-hmm.
1990, this is a bit of biographical information, so you're going to have to really dig deep for this one. I moved to a spot where I was able to walk 5 minutes to a movie theater. The number of films I saw in 1990 is astonishing. The number of bad films I saw in the theater in 1990 is astonishing. What was the lowest grossing movie of 1990 that I saw in the theater?
A Cry in the Wild.
What number is that?
169.
I did not see A Cry in the Wild in the theater. I don't know what that movie is.
158.
Oh, that's a good guess. Tune in tomorrow.
That's accurate. That's right. Tune in tomorrow. I saw in the theater.
Okay, you've gone belly up in Schitt's Creek. You need a paddle real bad. What do you reach for? Art! That's what I'm talking about. The very apex of your art. I want to hear your sinews crack and strain. I want your souls.
As I was scrolling down, I noted that this was the same year that The Russia House came in. So this was really Sean Connery's year of Russia.
Yeah.
I am impressed that Tune In Tomorrow made $1.7 million, honestly. I think I was the only person in the theater.
I ended up renting it on video, but I think I rented it the day it came out. So that was
same thing.
I was nerdy. Yeah.
Totally the same. Early adopter of Tune In Tomorrow. But it's funny. I remember some of these that even were further down playing in that theater. Like it was. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of movies on this list that I remember being hugely advertised and quite buzzy in 1990.
Yeah.
But
and they've completely faded.
Completely disappeared. Like White Hunter Black Heart. The marketing for that movie was all over the place, and it's 147 for the year.
That movie's amazing. Yeah. It's a great one.
I'm just looking at my lowest that I saw in the theater, and I saw it in the theater twice.
Whoa.
So I doubled his number 117, and that's Gerard Depardieu's Cyrano de Bergerac.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that I was that level of nerdy 14, 15-year-old that I saw Cyrano de Bergerac with Gerard Depardieu in the theater twice. And I didn't go to the movies that often. I didn't have a movie theater within walking distance.
This is what we call misspent Canadian youth.
And it got worse because when I was taking French in high school, I actually convinced one of my teachers to show Cyrano de Bergerac, and I brought in my copy, and I made everyone else watch it.
What's wrong with you?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe I identified with the central character of that movie. I'm really mad at everyone. The fact that Pump Up the Volume is at 92 on that list.
That's crazy.
So
yeah.
Criminally low.
Jen, which one was yours? I don't think you've committed to one yet.
I'm looking.
Oh, Loose Cannons. Oh, saw that one too. Loose Cannons made 5.5. That's incredible.
You know, it might be Ski Patrol. It might be that.
Murr! Looks like you made a new friend.
Get that beast out of here, Kramer, and I mean it, or I'm gonna turn on you like a mother-in-law.
Oh, wow.
That's impressive. I am, because I don't think I saw Ski Patrol in the theater, and I'm in awe of you now.
I think we went with a neighbor kid.
You speak of him like he was not all right.
I lived a lot of places, so I'm trying to remember which. Yeah. My Blue Heaven. Oh my gosh, what's wrong? That should be way higher than 53. Come on, you guys.
Yeah. I mean, look at this list. The Freshman is number 57. The Freshman.
And Marked for Death is number 27.
Something's wrong here.
Well, but you also have one of the greatest sequels of all time.
Gremlins 2, The New Batch.
Exactly.
Quick Change, number 82.
Great movie.
But now we have to not remember Gina Davis's side of the filming.
Very impressive list. You don't think of 1990 as being such a tremendous year. But
Goodfellas, Godfather 3, Miller's Crossing. It was a remarkable year. Cook the Thief, The Wife, Lover. I mean, fucking great year.
We haven't even mentioned Joe versus the Volcano. What is wrong with me? I mean, it's
friend of the show, Joe versus the Volcano.
Yeah.
Actually, looking at it, I think I saw Cyrano de Bergerac twice. I think the only other movie I saw in the theater this year was Jacob's Ladder. No, I saw Dick Tracy too.
Okay, all right.
Ernest Goes to Jail, otherwise known as the
I remember
sexy
that
Ernest
one.
movie.
Yeah, I remember everyone being shocked at the theater. Yep.
Okay, I think I found the most shocking one.
Oh, you found a shocking one.
Number 71.
71. Tremors. Only was 71. Right next to Men at Work.
Yeah. And Death Warrant.
These are all.
It did worse than Death Warrant. How many Death Warrant direct-to-video sequels are there? Talking about a film that just basically created its cult on VHS, and that's Tremors. Because I don't. Have you ever met someone who didn't like Tremors? I feel like they have to exist.
I don't know if I want to know someone who doesn't like Tremors. Jen's very quiet over there.
I remember seeing it in the 90s, but I couldn't tell you a thing about it. Yeah. Yeah. I need to watch it again, actually.
Broke into the wrong goddamn rec room, didn't you, you bastard?
have chosen wisely.